Hello, I'm Avis Kalfsbeck, and this is the Peace is Here podcast. Welcome to Peacewarts, School of Peacecraft and Inquiry, where we practice the skills of peace through short daily classes. We take the peace work seriously, but not ourselves. If you're joining us mid-school year, you're not late. Orientation begins at episode 198. I'd be so grateful if you help me spread the peace messages by sharing this episode with a friend. Welcome back, Peace Scholars. We are in the Department of Living Roots. Today I want you to look past the plants and look at the floor. That stream you hear isn't just for decoration. It's a scale model of a watershed. In this department, we don't look at maps with red and blue lines for countries. We look at maps of basins, aquifers, and river runs. Luna Leopold, the visionary American hydrologist and earth scientist, said, "The landscape is the grandest of all terrestrial documents, and the river is its most eloquent scribe." The concept, the hydrological map. In this department, we teach that watersheds ignore borders. Conflict arises when we try to force a political line over a hydrological reality. If you take too much water upstream, your neighbor downstream begins to starve. This is not a natural shortage. It is a breakdown of the multi-species treaty. To manage water is to manage the very reason for fighting. The history. The Indus Waters Treaty, 1960. Our historical anchor for this lesson is the Indus Waters Treaty. On paper, it is a technical agreement signed in 1960 between India and Pakistan, brokered by the World Bank. It was designed to divide the use of the 6 rivers in the Indus Basin, giving the eastern rivers to India and the western rivers to Pakistan. It created a permanent legal framework for data sharing, inspections, and dispute resolution. It was built to be a piece of living architecture, a structure meant to withstand the shifting sands of human politics. Now let's be honest about our history. Since that treaty was signed, India and Pakistan have fought 3 major wars. They have deep, unresolved political and territorial hostilities. So how can we claim this treaty is a success? Because while the soldiers were at the border, the Permanent Indus Commission, representatives from both sides, never stopped meeting. They didn't stop the wars, but they prevented the wars from becoming a total hydrological collapse. In political science, we speculate on the unfought wars, the millions of deaths from famine or nuclear escalation that were avoided because neither side turned off the tap. This is what we call functional peace. It is the realization that political borders are fragile, but biological needs are absolute. The treaty created a shared floor that stayed intact even when the walls of the house were on fire. It proves that even the most bitter enemies can maintain a specific, localized peace if they remain tethered to the same life support system. Now, this is certainly not total peace. Just because the bombs are flying doesn't mean it's okay, just because nobody is thirsty or can still wash their laundry. But if we can find it in our minds and hearts to share water because it seems so obvious not to die of thirst, maybe we can find it in our minds and hearts not to die of weapons. If we can cooperate to keep the blood of the earth flowing, we can eventually learn to stop spilling our own. The thesis, Upstream Debt and the Silent War. In the Department of Living Roots, we argue that peace emerges when water is governed as a common vessel rather than a strategic asset. If you treat a river like a weapon, you invite a siege. If you treat it like a circulatory system, you invite health. When a nation dams a river to create power or industrial irrigation, they're often creating a downstream debt. This is a primary driver of modern conflict. If a community at the headwaters extracts more than its share, the communities at the delta experience manufactured scarcity. True water security requires hydrodiplomacy, the radical idea that the health of the person at the end of the river is just as important as the health of the person at the start. We must also look at aquifer depletion, the silent war. While rivers are visible, aquifers, the massive underground banks of water, are invisible. We're currently engaged in what scholars call silent wars, where nations or corporations overpump shared groundwater. When an aquifer collapses, it is often permanent. This leads to mass migration, and migration is almost always framed by the scarcity script as a threat. Prevention doesn't require a military, it requires slow collective restraint. Finally, consider local security. A community that relies on a single centralized municipal pipe is a community that is vulnerable to coercion. During conflicts, cutting off water is often the first move of a siege. However, communities that practice indigenous water governance or local rain capture systems are harder to manipulate. By managing water through kinship and local watershed councils, people create hydrological autonomy. When you aren't afraid of your water being turned off by a distant power, you're less vulnerable to propaganda that tries to frame your neighbor as a threat to your survival. Your homework. 1. Look up the specific terms of the Indus Waters Treaty, 1960, or research the watershed you currently live in. 2. Write down one question about any of this episode's topics. If you don't have a question, just write no question. 3. Optional. Journal for 5 minutes. If you had to share your primary water source with someone you didn't trust, what rules would you want in place to make sure you both survived? The work of the worm. The worm knows that soil is only living if it's damp. It doesn't own the water, it just follows it. It moves through the landscape, aerating the earth so the rain can reach the roots. Within this vast system, we can find out where our water comes from before it reaches the tap. We can choose to follow the flow and remember that we were drinking from a treaty that was signed by the landscape long before we got here. Until our next class, keep your feet in the living roots. Class dismissed. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the Pieces Here podcast, the most helpful way is to follow it wherever you're listening. It helps share the message with others. You can also support this piecework at my Patreon for $4 a month, about what a used paperback goes for these days. Just go to Patreon at patreon.com/Avis Kalfsbeck. That's AVISKALFSBEEK. My most recent book is Monomutante, a best friend eco-fiction novella about food systems, featuring Tilly, Camus, Pedro, and the rest of the gang. It's book 6 in the Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet series and is available wherever you buy books. You can find all of my peace projects and stay in touch at aviskalfsbeck.com. Music is by Javier Peque Rodriguez. Sound effects are from Pixabay. Regarding peace, we need not delay or despair. We are not late. We are right on time to love. We are all scholars of peace. Listen for the peace.